It's just strange how some of the ideas of how we should teach and how we should do education is really set in stone for some people.
Bonjour, welcome to Wide Walls, a podcast where inspiring educators, researchers, designers, and innovators share their personal journey and their vision for creating better learning experiences for children. My name is Mathieu Penaud. I am a product manager and learning experience designer, and I am passionate about the role of design and technology in education and learning, and the humans behind it. If you find this episode insightful, share it with your friends and colleagues and give us some stars on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you very much for your support and for being part of the conversation. And now, let's welcome our guest. Hello everyone! This episode is a little special. It is the first part of my conversation with Josh Masson, and you can find the second part on Josh's podcast called Loops and Life Cycles. The link is in the description. Josh Masson is a former Air Force pilot who now provides strategic guidance and technical expertise in cybersecurity and risk management to startups and large companies worldwide. As a cyber instructor and courseware developer, we discussed how he leverages his experience in the military to build learning experiences for adults. And more generally, we talked about his approach to education as a whole. I also shared some of my perspectives and insights as a learning designer and a product manager in EdTech. And now, the first part of my conversation with Josh Masson. Hi, Josh. How are you doing?
Hey, Matthew. Doing great. It's good to talk to you.
I'm super excited about your background. I know all the amazing experiences you've been through, and we've chatted a little bit before, and I know we have a lot of things in common and things that I want to talk about with you. So, yeah, excited.
Yeah, it's an interesting world where we can meet folks from all sorts of different backgrounds, and yet there's a lot that we have in common, a lot that we do in common.
Yeah,
just by working in wholly separate roles.
Totally. And actually, it's funny because I think learning is always a common denominator. Because whatever we do, we get to learn. We have to learn. We share. We have to teach others. And so it's kind of a big denominator of everybody's experience, I guess.
Oh man, I've been thinking about something recently. Have you always wanted to be in the education space?
That's a great question. Both my parents are teachers. Were teachers. So I've kind of grew up in that environment. Always been kind of interested in the education space, but never really thinking of working there. Actually, the fun thing is that my parents love their job, but they've always told me, don't be a teacher. And that's mostly because it's such a tough job that is not rewarded nearly as it should. And so that's you. It's too hard for what you get from it, and unfortunately, because that's such a beautiful and important job. So it's funny. They've always told me that, and I always tell them I've still found my way to get back in
the new way of teaching and education.
Yeah,
I feel like we're kind of two different parts of a new revolution in learning. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit much.
Yeah, I don't know if revolution is the word, but definitely looking at learning with a more modern eye, I feel, because now we are way more aware from research, from a lot of different sources, a lot more aware of what works, what doesn't work, and also have way more possibilities, whether it's through technology, through modern approaches to bring in new elements to learning that was not possible some time ago. And so it feels, but it's an uphill battle because it's it's kind of a big monolith sometimes when you look at it, and it feels hard to to move parts of it, and even harder to move it all towards a direction. But it's an exciting area. What do you think?
Very
what do you
true.
think of this?
Well, I've had some strange experiences. I'm near Washington, D.C., and there's a old time schoolhouse. That's a building that's been around for a long time, and it's a small schoolhouse. Really not that, I don't know, about twice the size of my office. That had been used for a schoolhouse for a long, long time, and we took our kids there, and they participated in learning what it was like to go to school, over 100 years ago. And the way that they taught was not all that different than the way I was taught. And yeah, and it's just strange how some of the ideas of how we should teach and how we should do education is really set in stone for some people.
Yeah. There's a lot of that effect of you've been taught a certain way, and somehow you're like, I turned out good, so that must have been like a good way of teaching, and why should we teach otherwise?
Yeah.
So you refer to your own experience, and so your own experience was so long ago that it's not necessarily like relevant anymore, but that's your point of reference. So
interesting. I like looking at how do we evolve with things, because obviously what you're working with is not the same tools that we had when we were kids. So is it an evolution? Is it trying to find a new and better way? Is that a new idea or new concept, do you think?
So there's it's interesting because there's like some baseline learning. Like internally, we still learn the same way that we learned, like I would say even like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Like our brain has not evolved much in 1,000 years, like even more. So and in terms of like developmental stages and how we retain information, organize information, make sense of the world, all that is kind of a baseline that is the reference point for when you want to teach like someone, especially kids. And then the tools you use, the method you use, the approaches you use is mainly trying to make the best of how your brain works. So when you do activities that are more like hands-on, it's because you're gonna tap into different parts of the brain and through that, like multiple connections, that's gonna maybe eventually help you internalize some of the things that you learn, or make more connection within your brain. So it's kind of like understanding how the brain works, and that's why the science of learning and the advances in neuroscience are like super important for learning. Because the more we understand that, the more we can create these tools, approaches, methodologies to make the best of that. But in the end, it's the same brain,
Right? Yeah. I sometimes wonder, are we utilizing a new approach, or are we just finding a new hack for how to do it? My wife homeschools our daughters, and I talked to a lot of we are in a co-op with a bunch of homeschoolers. That's how I met Rebecca. We often have conversations about like how well we can teach. There's a joy of one-on-one or like one-on-two, like teaching when you have homeschoolers, and just they're able to try different things and see if it works. And I've noticed, I don't do the homeschooling, but I've noticed there's a big advantage to doing something that gets the kids' attention. There's a lot of different ways of teaching a thing, but if you can hold their attention while you're doing it, that's obviously going to be more effective. I wonder, is that a big piece of it? Or do you think once we've gotten their attention, there's different things that we could then apply to create more of those connections within them?
That's huge. Like having the learner focus and be like engaged in the activity, the experience is fundamental to learning. If you're not focusing, if you're not engaged, that's definitely gonna lead to much less like learning outcomes, less good retention. So it's not, I would say almost like the first step of a learning experience is to make sure that whoever is involved is focusing and engaged in the experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, what are your strategies like to engage your kids?
So, like I said, I don't do the homeschooling very much because I'm not used to engaging at that level. I teach adults or I build training for adults. And having come from the military and the Air Force, there's a certain amount where they have to pay attention.
Yeah.
Or what I'm teaching or training is job skill specific. So they come in wanting a certain amount. But you have to make it dynamic. You have to make it interactive. In the background right now, I've got a virtual machine up that I've been trying to get work for a lab that's for training. It's not training I'm delivering. It's for a friend. But he's built in this lab for a training course that he's teaching. It's a 100 level intro to cyber. And the outcomes aren't tied to becoming good at the skill that's in the lab. The lab itself is built exactly for that, to pull in someone, make them a little more interested. This course is built to bring anyone into the idea of cyber security and give them a taste of actually doing the hacking without having to, go through the 100-hour course that I've built on how to do all those things. This is just like quick, get in there, see that, it doesn't take that much. You can do this.
Doing is very important. Like doing and like small wins to just keep you, motivated and engaged. That's definitely super important. Yeah.
And a lot of topics with training adults, it can get dry and boring. And if you're not able to find a point to make it interact with their lives, make it interact with their job, then you're going to lose them on focus, and then you're just talking to a wall. Kids are a whole nother animal. They might be interested, but man, if you don't keep them engaged, that can drop off real fast.
Yeah, for sure. But
do you see that a lot? I know you're building software for training kids now.
Yeah, to like learning skills, especially like standards, like everything like math, language, learning, science. That's aligned with the standards.
Well,
but before that, I've done a lot of also like hands-on learning. So literally doing like hundreds of workshops and camps with kids, parents, both physical and online. So got that experience too.
Well,
much easier to engage kids on physical activities, obviously, because that's it's more playful. It engages their whole body, so much easier. There's something to say about it. It's hard to get kids to focus on something that they're not interested in, obviously. So
right,
it's the job, I feel, of any like learning designer or educator to find a way to make whatever they're learning meaningful. And for me, that's really the key. As soon as you make something meaningful, and the kid, you kind of tap a little bit in that intrinsic motivation of I really want to do that because I'm just interested in that, and there's a lot of ways to do it. It's just when you do math, you can do math with anything, right? You can do math with sports. Super easy to do math with sports. You can do math with geography. You can do math with fashion and clothing. There's so many ways that you can approach a subject that it's gonna that's definitely one of the key to create an experience that's efficient in terms of learning. I want to come back a little bit on the focus one as well. I just want to say that it's important to focus and be engaged for like learning something specific, or you want to attain certain learning objectives. But there's also a lot of learning that happens, outside of that, when you just without focusing, just like interacting with the world without specifically, focusing on something. Especially for kids, there's still learning happening, like all around, right? That's not the only way to learn, is to be focused on something. But if you want to teach something specific at some point, they will have to spend some time, specifically engaged on that topic.
That's a great point. I believe everything has a life cycle, whether you want it to or not. You said you've done lots of webinars and workshops in the past, hands-on or virtual. And I'm sure the first one that you did, you went in with a plan, and then the second one was different than the first one.
Yes, always.
And the later ones were different from the beginning ones, right? You started with a goal, objectives, and then the things that worked, you kept. The things that didn't work, you probably dropped. And it's kind of how we do all things. I believe everything's got a life cycle, if you will.
Yeah.
It's just how we evolve to be where we are.
Definitely keep improving and reflecting and improving on what you're doing. Yeah,
exactly. Do you think that there's things that we could do to help others get to a better starting point? I know when I started teaching, learned a lot about course objectives, lesson objectives, Bloom's taxonomy, like a lot of fundamentals of teaching and how to build curriculum that, I didn't have to sit and try to teach stuff without that. At least I got that core framework. Do you think where we're at with the technology that we have, the fact that we can talk about Bloom's taxonomy and you kind of know what I'm talking about, and I know like you're talking about, and we're able to build on that? Do you think that there's more of that than there used to be?
I'm not sure, to be honest. And actually, so there might be actually a lot of people listening. I mean, I don't know, but definitely some people listening that don't know what Bloom taxonomy is.
Sure.
Which is basically
different levels of the depth of learning, be it a skill or knowledge or application.
Yeah, basically at the bottom you have like just rote memorization. Yeah.
Yep, like knowledge. Do you know a thing, as opposed to could you create a whole new idea off of it? It would be a higher level of the knowledge.
Exactly.
Of Bloom's taxonomy.
Yeah. There's more ways for educators to learn about education and learning, for sure, because there's more like tools out there. There's more resources that are easily accessible. But I feel, for me, if you ask me for like a starting point, like for an educator, I would really think of, the first thing that comes to mind is get to know the people you're going to teach well, get to know something personal about them, because that's, even if you're not able to necessarily personalize the experience, creating that first rapport is, on one end, is gonna help the learner feel eventually like more comfortable. And we're not talking about something personal like that someone doesn't want to share or anything, right? It's just, a little something.
No, it's getting them emotionally involved. What comes to mind for me.
Yeah, exactly. So that will like help them feel more like involved and comfortable in doing the activity, and also give you like some way when you communicate with them to, bring in some stuff that are not like random objective things that you will say to anybody, but something that feels more targeted and personal and meaningful. Again, we come back to the meaningfulness of it to the learner. I think if you have that, that's a very good start to any learning experience, because then you can build off this and bring that light bond at the beginning, and you can build, of course, for the teachers who have like the same class for a year, you create that very deep bond with the students. If that's a one-off experience, maybe just knowing where the person comes from, and just like bring it up once, saying like, oh, is that how you do it in in New York? Just that little thing that makes a big difference in how the person is going to engage with the activity.
Yeah, so much so.
Is there like when you teach adults? Because I've taught adults, but just a little bit, mostly training educators, basically, how to engage in the way that I feel when we get adults, we are much less inclined to go into like a learning activity with enthusiasm and and playfulness.
You're not wrong.
And so it's harder to bring it out from adults, I feel. Have you experienced that?
Some of the things I've taught, especially with like military government, people are there and they're learning a thing whether they wanted to or not. And so, but someone's decided that they need to attend this training so they can do their job better. And so there is a lot in that rapport and a lot in trying to connect connect dots to what you think they might be doing. And sometimes that's digging in and trying to get them to talk about how they might use it in their job or where they might already be doing this stuff, but they can do it better. Or finding those common strings. You're like, well, I get it. You didn't necessarily want to do this. You came to this training because you're the person in the office who they decided needed to go to this training. That's okay. We've all been there. What could we get out of this so that it's not painful for you? It's not painful for me. And ironically, do I want it to be painful? No. Is it going to be painful? No. But by getting on that level and becoming like a team with them in that way, it does exactly that. It diffuses a little bit of their anxiety. It gets them, a little more relaxed and a little more interested. Feel like the subject matter would either be interesting or not, right? But no, their level of engagement, even just with you, can totally change how interested they are in the subject.
Totally. Yeah.
At least that's what I've realized in a lot of cases. All across the board, very technical stuff, very leadership-y stuff. And sometimes at like a conference, people will be there and they don't know necessarily what they're going to get from the talk. You put out a description and a title, but are you going to get really deep into coding language or technical specs on a computer? Or is it going to be a high level sort of discussion? And you have to set that framework and get them interested, not necessarily in the skills that they're going to take out of it, but how it relates to them.
Yeah. How they're going to apply it.
Once you hit that, then they'll follow you anyway.
Yeah. That's so true. Like they're basically contextualizing like their learning. So they're able to project how they're going to apply that learning. Because you don't want to learn something. I mean, you may want to learn something for the sake of learning, but especially in the professional space, it's always good to like have a sense of how you want to apply, what you learn. Because also by applying your learnings, that's how you deepen the learning as well. Like if you go, especially like typically it's a good example, like conferences. How often you go to conferences and 2 months later you've forgotten like everything you've learned in that conference. The only ways you don't forget is if one, you've applied it. Yeah, you have applied something you've learned at conference somewhere, and so that kind of like cemented in your brain. Or you stayed in touch with someone you've met and keep having this conversation with the person or like the people that you've met there. I feel those are the two ways that you're gonna get something out of it.
They say you'll remember longer how you felt than what was said.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
It's one of those, can we use that? Can we be purposeful in that and tie it in some way to take them along? One of my friends has a whole how to give a conference talk. And I've stolen a lot of the idea of, it goes into a hero's journey. Everything from Homer's Odyssey through Lord of the Rings. Like this hero's journey will grab your attention. Can you apply that? Like my daughter's learning multiplication, but she's using Beast Academy, and it's very much tied to stories. I don't watch too much of it because often getting to work, she's doing things. But even there, if you can, pull them in, make them interested, throw like the facts at them, get them like, oh, but it changes. It's a little different. It's a little more complicated. Oh, you want to go a little deeper. If you build out your conference talk in that same way, then people get to a certain point and they've forgotten what the next talk is. They just want to know, where are you going with this?
Yeah.
They want to know how the book ends. What's at the end of the episode?
Yeah.
What's after the climax of the movie?
That's pretty cool. I like this idea of using the like narratives and like story arcs and apply that to conferences or like teaching in general. That's super interesting. Yeah.
If you apply that with your lesson objectives, how are you structuring the lesson to build a foundation? Introduce the character, introduce the problem, and then have them fight through learning the problem, and then right up to the climax, and then lesson objectives, pound it, get it in at the end when they're high emotion with with takeaways before they start forgetting aren't interesting.
Yeah, no, that's fun to think about, because you can think like,
Feel free to use
like
that.
if you have like that arc, you can when the hero goes through, it's going well, so next something very terrible will happen. Like in the lesson could be like, oh, now we're gonna introduce that thing that's gonna make things much harder. And like, damn, but still going back up, and usually when you back up, you fall again like even deeper, and then eventually you climb out and like you learn from your. So yeah, and in that case, like the challenging part becomes like a fun challenge. Like it becomes like, oh, I'm a hero. I just got hit. I need to just get back on my feet, and I can totally see it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see like teachers having like the time to build something like that, unfortunately. But if it's built out for them, like as a learning, experience or tool,
or if you can do it,
exciting.
One of the great things I like about teaching adults is the hard work's been done. When they show up to me, like they've done grade school, they might have gone to college, they've done some sort of training, they're at least interested in a thing. Often they're either already employed or they're working on becoming employed. So we've got a lot of foundation to build off. You're not having to hit rote memorization, foundation level, like this is what a tangent is. You're like, whoa, like that's been covered. That's been covered. We're going to get into either something that is interesting for their job or interesting for their life. And so, your thought process probably, I'm starting to notice, is a lot of, okay, how can like teachers for children and childhood education employ this? And I think there's going to be a certain amount where you can introduce a topic and get them interested, but then you're going to have to return to that often over and over. It's why it takes a whole year to learn our multiplication tables. And it's before that you're learning, addition and subtraction, and then it takes quite a while before you get to algebra and then calculus eventually. There's a lot of foundations, and you can't go on a story arc every single day. Sometimes we just gotta practice, right? Do more of this, work through those, whatever it is that's a block of this understanding. But if you can at least build it in every once in a while, I think it's going to
like build up the motivation to go through these like tough practices, because learning is hard. Like you have to go through practice, you have to go through some level of repetition, you have to go through trial and errors, and being blocked and frustrated and get over it and learn from that. Like learning is hard. Nobody ever learned something hard like easily. That never happened. It's like it's a non-existing story. You have to go through these challenges to eventually get to the point where you've internalized and mastered anything that you want to learn, whether it's multiplication or it's like driving being a pilot, and flying a jet.
It is wild. The methods can be employed the same way that they taught us in pilot training. When you really get down to what the lessons are like, and then what each instructional flight is like, it is that there's an objective. There's something that we're going to either have taught to you to know, knowledge level, or shown you to, like introduced. Now we're going to demonstrate in the plane. There is an objective, no matter what, be it knowledge or skills at the end of it. And a day in class, a semester in a grade, there are going to be those objectives no matter what.
I'm curious in specifically for that type of training, because it has to have be extremely rigorous, because there's some elements are like literally life or death, like skills and knowledge, right? I'm curious, like how do you get to that level of precision, and how do you make sure that like your stuff well enough that you can get on the plane and come back safe?
Crazy levels of drill before you even get like to the point where you're going to go to the plane. You're discussing all the steps on how to do it, and you're being drilled in how to do it. And they have this thing called stand up. First thing in the morning, all of the students stand up around or around the room, and the instructor introduces an idea, and it starts real basic. We're in the aircraft, and you're starting the engines, and you get this light, and there's smoke, and all this stuff is happening. What do you do? And I can tell you, like, things you always do. Aviate, navigate, communicate. Sir, I will maintain aircraft control. Analyze the situation, take proper action. You have to say that. When I have the controls, I look down and I'm expecting to see this. Do I see that? Based off of what he told me. Do I see like a fire light? It's like, yes. The situation, then I'm going to reach between my legs and pull the fire handle. Anyways, we haven't touched the plane. We haven't even talked about how to, do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Just talking straight up procedures. And you have to build that, because then when you get to the plane, if something happens, I've already thought about this. And even before you step into the actual plane, you've done a simulator. A simulator that the initial simulator doesn't have a canopy, doesn't have any screens. It is basically just the cockpit with the switches and the stick. And you get used to moving the stick and like the throttle and pressing the buttons. And some of them might work, some of them don't. But you have a checklist of how do I turn this thing on? That one's got to turn on before this one turns on. Then I need to check that the wings don't stick. So I move the stick, and that's actually on my checklist. So you've done all of those things. You've done them in a machine that's not going in. Even doesn't even pretend to go. Then you move to one where you've got a simulator with like a big old screen. When you move, not much else has changed. It feels a lot the same. When you move stuff, stuff moves on the screen. Now you're actually kind of flying. People are going to talk to you. You have to go through your procedures. They can kill your engine and say, okay, you ran into a bird and your engine power is just dropping back down. You keep putting your foot on the pedal and you're getting no power. What are you going to do? You can't just pull over on the highway. And so then you go through all of those steps. So by the time you've actually gotten to a plane with an engine that, moves, you've done all the hard stuff. You're like, if this thing crashes right now, I know exactly what to do. Well, I should, because I've talked about it in depth. Oh, and if you mess up one of those steps, they say sit down, and then someone else goes. And then they take over from where you're at. If you mess up, then they go sit down. The next person goes. It's one of those, if you're going to do something that's dangerous and life or death, then cover all the life or death stuff where there's no death involved.
Yeah. You reduce the stakes, like you remove the high stakes and you learn with low stakes.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you move to higher and higher stakes as you go.
Yeah. To me, it just makes sense having gone through it. I wouldn't have known beforehand. But I've flown 6 different aircraft. I learned how to fly gliders, and then I learned how to fly Cessnas, and then I learned how to fly actual jet aircraft. And a lot of the process is the exact same. You sit there and talk about how you're going to do it. You practice how you're going to do it. You pretend. You go through all of the steps before you've even left a chair in the classroom.
It's like putting yourself in situation. It's funny because it actually makes me think of how like kids do like role play, and like pretend to be in situations and pretend to be people and like learn through that too. So there's probably a little bit of similarity in a way, because if you put yourself, like in the role, like I'm gonna be a cashier and I'm gonna like give back the money. And I'm talking about a very young kid, right? But if they find it like interesting, the fact that in character they're gonna take it so more like seriously, and so they might actually like learn, like get those automatism, and it's like, I've done that 5 times. I know that if you give me one, and the thing is like 50 cents, I give you back 50 cents because I've done it like 5 times, and I was a cashier, so I had to do it like properly, right? Like in a way, the stakes are high for them when they role play.
Oh my god! So, oh man. Oh, we've done that with our kids. The older one has been through that and knows dimes, quarters, dollars, all that. The younger one's getting to that point, and setting up a little store. And that's something I remember doing when I was their age. You had pretend money in class and you would go and buy things for the day. Like in order to get you thinking about, okay, how do I make change for this? Like what are the different denominations and how do those add or multiply in such a way that like you're thinking about it faster and naturally, and that engagement before you don't even have to sit and think about, okay, let's write this down. This is 25, and if you have two of them, what is that?
Yeah, and somehow like it becomes important, because if you just like learn like you're on your book and you just like do your math, it's not that important. If you get it wrong, like sure, your parent or your teacher might not be like super happy. You might have like a bad mark, but if you're like giving back money to like a customer in your like little shop, even if your little shop is your bed or your cardboard box, like suddenly it's important. You cannot afford like giving like the wrong money back, because that would be a big mistake. So, and it's
right.
because I think like for adults it's much harder to get that kind of seriousness in play. So in the case of like pilot, you're going to be flying them, so you're putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be right. But if you have you're teaching adults about it could be like cybersecurity, and you want to put them in a role that is a role they don't have, they will never have, but that could be a little like fun and out of the box. It's much harder for adults to take it seriously and be like improvise. They might some will do it more easily than others. Eventually, if you're a good like instructor, you can get them into it, but I feel it's much harder.
Are you familiar with like Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
Like role-playing games. One of the things that we do in cybersecurity is a tabletop exercise. And it's going through a scenario, and often you have people play their roles. Like ideally, you would have people play their real roles, and you would go through the real procedures that they've made. And it could be anything from there's been a ransomware incident, and our company is in the news, and how are we going to deal with this? So you have like the chief of marketing in there, and the public affairs, and the CEO, and the CFO. The SEC wants to know, like, what are we going to do with all of this? And you're setting up this scenario for them to play their roles, try to figure out how they would interact without having to actually be in that situation. But at the same point, you also are teaching them how to interact and how to have that conversation. And if something goes wrong, then you can nudge it. It really is like that stand-up where they got us emotionally. Like the night before, they'd be like, okay, you need to know like this procedure. And I'd sit there and be like, read, memorize, read. I need to know this for tomorrow. Then you go the next day, and then all of a sudden they're like, Lieutenant Mason, like, yeah? You have the aircraft. So maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, take proper action, land as soon as conditions permit. I do this. They're like, wrong. And I'm like, whoa. Like, why is my heart beating so fast? Yeah. Why does this matter to me? Like last night, it was just words in an order. And now, like, it's way different. So we take what this procedure is. Like, what would you do in a ransomware situation? Oh, well, we would do this, that, and the other. It's like, oh, really? Boom, you get this phone call. What do you do?
I like that. Yeah.
What do you do? Your CFO's right there. Your CMO's right there. You can talk, but give me an answer.
Yeah. Actually, it's so funny because, I say it's hard to get. So it depends on people. Like some people get much easier into those roles than others, for sure. But I love how often when you do this kind of workshops and eventually you get everybody to like warm up and get into their roles, at some point the magic happens when you can see them becoming so involved that they kind of almost forget about the exercise. And I know it has happened to me as well. Yeah. You're like talking about like the CEO and the CFO. You're going to get a CFO being like, no, but we're really going to lose that money. Like, almost being angry. Like, you have to do something now. Like, if not do it, like
we're going to lose the deal.
And
we're not going to make our quarterly numbers. Stockholders are going to be pissed. Yeah. You're like, they're not real stockholders. Like, this isn't actually.
You get people like really like fighting.
Their
about
emotion
it.
from like
the emotions go up. Yeah.
Their emotion from last week and like real world stuff comes in.
It's almost a therapy.
I like that for literature and history. So many history classes I took in high school and college. This is the timeline. These are the events that happened, and it just feels so monotone. And I there's times where now that I know how this works, I wish it was like, all right, Matthew, like it's 1847. Like you're in Aix-en-Provence. Like, what would life be like there? What was going on? We were just watching Beauty and the Beast the other day. So this is, my brain puts all the things together. So it's like, okay, well, what was pre-revolutionary like France like? You know? Or 1740s, you know? Who was in charge? What would your role in the town have been? Like, what would it have looked like, 10 years later? Actually thinking about, okay, how would that apply to me? What would be my takeaway?
Yeah.
Like, who would my neighbors be?
Yeah.
You're in Greece in like 380. Like, what's your life like?
And then you can like bring in some events, like this thing happened, like how you react, and because you're right? engaged in it, like you're gonna remember that event. You're gonna remember because you were somehow like part of it, right? For short moments.
Right?
Yeah. No, I love that.
Be like, you're a pot thrower before the Peloponnesian War in Athens. Like, you write poetry and make pots. And people came through the streets and they said, hey, we got to go to war. Like, here's your sword. And you go, what? What would that be like? What would you do?
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. I know like at school, we're doing a little bit of that for language learning, where you like just simulate some situations, right? To like practice the language. But that's like for like history, geography would be super fun. Even for like science and math, like I'm one of like there's probably some ways to do it as well, which I like you can make a, like for example, around architecture, there's so much you can do and say like, oh, you're actually an architect, you're actually going to build something for someone, and you have to make all those measurements and you have all the geometry that's involved. And right. One thing actually that it makes me think of when I think about architecture is also like cross-disciplinary like learning, which I think is so important and like not happening enough in schools. Because, when you typically learn history, you can bring in like so many other subjects into it. You can add obviously language because you might like read some passages or like write something that belongs to that era, for example, or you can bring some physics. Say you're that archer in Greece, while you throw your arrow, like what angle do you need to get that arrow to reach the enemy?
Oh man, my physics teacher liked using stuff like that, and I love that class because of it. It's the thing. Like, what do we remember from when we were kids? Like, I remember playing like shopkeeper in school. I've done that with our kids, and I remember that physics teacher. Obviously, it's the emotions and the events around them. Do I remember the numbers? No. Like that just kind of came back to me because I remembered the emotion.
Yeah, it's interesting because all the guests I've had on the podcast, I've asked them, who was your favorite teacher? And every single time the teachers that come up created that kind of like emotional memory. And it's not about what they were teaching. It's about how they were behaving with the kids, how they were caring about the kids, how they were making sure that they were learning in a way that is enjoyable and meaningful. And and that was huge. Consistent. Every single one like was around that.
Yeah. My three favorite instructors, Mr. Oberly from high school, my physics teacher. I don't know that I can give you the name of any of my other high school teachers, but I remember Mr. Oberly. And then BJ Strasser, Dr. BJ Strasser at the Air Force Academy was my philosophy teacher. I took a class with him and DJ Joy, Donald Joy, who was symbolic logic, a real gets you to remember things kind of coarse.
Mhm.
You know, it was like me and the philosophy guys and the math majors in there. And the topic is ancient and rather dry, but I remember that course and those teachers because of that exact thing right there. That's wild. Man, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
What about you? Who is your favorite teacher?
Yeah, I think
or
one that
professor?
comes back when I asking myself the question is a teacher I had in prep school. So prep school is a concept in France where it's right after high school. You have like 2 years of very
Mm-hmm.
intense prep school before you go into engineering school. So you have like a national exam
Mm-hmm.
at the end. That's kind of like the most intense studying you're gonna do.
Yeah.
And for me, it was for engineering school, so it was math, physics, chemistry. And so my chemistry teacher, Madame Masson, it's funny because she was like just a few years older. It was a first year teacher, but she teaching, but she was like brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and and she was like
Yeah.
young and cool and so approachable and and she had
Mm-hmm.
that thing of making you feel that you can do so much. Like she will tell me like, oh, you can definitely like get to that level. I'm like, no. And but somehow
Mm-hmm.
she will make you believe it. And that made me like better because I was like getting like more
Yeah.
confident about myself uh and she will also be, when I do something wrong, don't study enough, get like a bad mark or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
she will show like disappointment, a little bit like a parent will show disappointment, because she's
Yeah.
also like involved. You could see that she was very involved in my
Yeah.
success, right? It meant a lot for her that I would be successful, and that was the case for the other students as well. And so when we don't do good, it's not like you did bad. It's like, oh no, please, like it hurt her that you're not good, like doing as well as your
Yeah.
potential can could
Yeah.
lead you to be. And so that
Ooh,
was,
that's
yeah, that
huge.
was that was a great memory of great memories of her, and there's a lot of respect
Yeah.
because she, you could see that she was passionate about her subject and
Mm-hmm.
just like so brilliant and knowledgeable on it. And so that also create that form of respect when you're like, okay, that the respect is very important as well. I feel when you want to create a relationship
Yeah.
with someone that's teaching you.
Yeah. I get that. Having a feeling of that they
Mm-hmm.
care. If they're passionate about it, then do you think maybe it triggers something subconsciously that's like, well, if they're passionate about it, should I be passionate
Yeah, and
about it?
even the way they teach, when someone is passionate, they're gonna teach you in a way that's so much more interesting because you can feel,
Mm-hmm.
you get pulled into it. You can feel it's like, oh, and you put that two molecules together, and isn't it magnificent that it creates that third molecule? And you're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like, oh wow, yeah, no, that's, yeah, no, that is magnificent. Versus like a professor would just say, you put this one together and it makes this one great. You know?
You know what? That's huge, actually. Mr. Oberly was also my high school physics and chemistry teacher, and I don't remember almost anything from my college chemistry
Mm.
classes, just because I don't think I ever felt anything other than that boring
Yeah, yeah,
class, like rote knowledge
yeah.
stuff. I don't think I ever saw that passion
Mm.
either. And that's
And I think it
huge.
applies, yeah. It applies to, yeah, it applies to all subjects. Because everything can be magical in a way. Math is definitely
Mhm.
magical. Language can be magical. Like history can be magical. Anything can have a form of, can get exciting if you really like look at it in a
Yeah.
certain way. It's more question of mindset. I know I had that. I took Latin in
Mhm.
middle school and high school, and in high school I also had that teacher was, it was such a character. It was like an old man that looked like he was coming from 60 years ago. He had this little pocket watch.
Yeah.
It like little like suit, like old school suit, almost like tuxedo. It was and he was so passionate about the history of Rome and ancient history. and he will tell us his story, and like a storyteller was like, and at this moment, Zeus come to Earth and turned into a cow, and all he wanted to do was just to get all the ladies down there, just get them. I won't say the words that he was saying, but he was like,
I'm with you.
Everybody was like hooked and like listening to his stories about like Rome, and it was fascinating, and every time we had to go to his class, it was a joy. And there was that other professor that was not doing that, and they were the only two Latin professor. And every time you get to your next year, you're like, which one do I get? It's either the fun one, or the boring one. And in the end, it gets more memorable for sure.
So I'm spending a lot of time building out labs and some on-demand material. You are building some training, like educational software. How do you think we could try to apply that, getting that emotion, getting that interest, getting that like storytelling in impersonal sort of education?
Find my answer to this question and the second part of our conversation on George's podcast, Loops and Life Cycles. Let me know if you enjoyed this new format and wish to see more of these types of conversations in the future on White Walls. In the next episode, coming out soon, I invited Dr. Sonia Tiwari to talk about visual design in education and AI influencers for children. Stay tuned, stay creative, and keep learning.